All right, so we have Frank Arthur Smith joining us today. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm here. I'm here.
Denny's here.
And
That's the
he's here.
important thing.
Yes. All right. So for those who have not heard of your series Open to It, can you give us a rundown?
God, no. Yeah, so Open to It is a queer comedy series. It's about a couple experimenting with being in an open relationship and kind of like the silly, sexy situations that arise from that. Because in the queer space, I feel like we deal a lot with trauma, particularly around non-monogamy. And I wanted to give a different slant to that that was like, comedic and warm and fun.
For sure. Well, how did the concept and idea for the series come to fruition, and why did you want to explore the themes of thruples and open relationships?
My own sad, horrible mistakes. No, I think like it started when I sort of saw in other shows how they explored that topic, and it often ended in disaster for the couple. And just from my own lived experience, I'm like, I don't think my relationship is a disaster. I think everything's going great. On top of that, like obviously when more people, more problems. And so like we do run into silly situations every now and then. So the first three episodes kind of came from like loosely inspired from my own life. But then beyond that, I was just very inspired by our actors and the characters they'd created. And now it sort of is very much like a just friends comedy about them and like their sexual pursuits or lack thereof.
Okay, perfect. Well, you've never been in a throuple yourself, have you?
No, I would say like we have definitely had very good friends, but I think like Matt and I were each other's primary partner and we don't really have like secondary people that we personally like see. Our rule is kind of always like we need to prioritize each other, and we wouldn't necessarily like take time away from each other to be with someone else. But that's just like our thing that works for us. Like, and that's what I try to communicate with the show too, is like this couple is like bumping along and finding their own rhythm, but different rhythms work for different people. And that rhythm can even be complete monogamy. We're trying to be like non-judgmental about it. Like whatever you want to try or do is fine as long as you two are communicating and consenting.
Okay,
Or you three, depending.
yeah, exactly. And you and Matt, you just recently got engaged, is that correct?
We did. We got engaged over Christmas. And okay, I am wearing the ring. I didn't forget it today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We make light of it though. Like if one of us forgets, I'm like, well, tonight he's my boyfriend and I'm his fiance.
Of course. Well, being in an open relationship, when you do explore that part of your relationship, what are some of the biggest pros and cons you have encountered?
This is a great question. I don't think I've been asked that before. I'll just start with a con because it came right to mind. A con is like being on a first date because sometimes like you're so used to your partner and obviously the people in your life, and then you're like, oh right, like jitters, not knowing what to talk about, like oh this is frustrating. And not even like if you're meeting for the first time. Sometimes it's someone like we've gotten to know decently, but we're like, oh, let's see if like that part of the relationship can exist. And then you're kind of like, oh, it was much easier chemistry when that wasn't on the table, and now I'm nervous.
Hmm.
um but the pro is like the complete trust, I would say, that like this part of our relationship has made us love one another more, understand one another more, communicate better, communicate more clearly. Like to make it functional for us and anybody, you kind of have to be very clear and transparent about both your intentions, but your feelings as well. And I feel just so secure and happy with him, I think, because of that layer of our relationship in part.
Okay, perfect. Non-monogamy is more common in the queer community. Why do you think that is?
This question I have thought about before, and my perception is that like we are happiest when we don't just try to imitate what we see in, the mainstream heterosexual culture. Like what keeps, I think, the queer community vibrant is that we don't have to be like anybody else. We get to set our own rules, have our own expectations, make ourselves happy. And this is like a variant that I think works for people and satisfies certain needs. And there's just something about being able to live freely, live openly, and like express yourself in a different way that is authentic to you that I think appeals to a lot of queer people.
For sure. And in what ways is Open to It helping to make the entertainment industry more diverse and representative?
There are a lot of ways in which we try to make the show as inclusive as possible. For one, obviously portraying ethical non-monogamy in a upbeat way, but also in our cast we have, in crew we have 50% female people, 50% people of color. We're 67% queer, and we're also in later episodes exploring like disability as well. And like we've always had deaf characters recurring in the cast, but then in episode 8 the guys go on their first date with a deaf professor, and it ends up being this very romantic encounter where, like, because the guys don't sign that well, they kind of have to figure out a way to communicate. And yeah, it ends up being this very, I think, like, touching, affecting thing where you find people with different abilities kind of coming together. And we had a lovely deaf director who added that authenticity to the piece. So yeah, and I just want to, like I was telling you earlier, I've started learning ASL because I wanted to be able to communicate on a basic level with our crew and actors. But yeah, it's just something I feel very passionately about now as a queer person. Obviously, I've had my moments of feeling marginalized, but I see especially how disabled queer people get even fewer opportunities. And I just think with the show, because I care so much about being non-judgmental and open-minded, I really want to just make it as expansive a tent as possible. That's my hope with it.
For sure, definitely. And ultimately, what do you hope viewers take away from the series?
I want viewers to be very just validated within their own relationships, no matter what it looks like. If you two are super happy being monogamous, I am happy for you. All I want is for people to feel comfortable to explore boundaries they wish to explore together. And if they've found it all and are happy, that's great too. I just never want, in so much of my life, but especially in relationships, I want people making their decisions from a place of confidence, not
Mhm.
fear. I
Yeah.
think that's what I'd like to impart.
Okay, perfect. And you star in the show as the lead character, Greg. Why did you want to take on this role?
I don't always write myself into things I create, but this one felt like very personal and like I understood this character's neuroses. And I don't know, just in the whole exploration of polyamory in my own life, I've been very attuned to it the whole time. Every little, change in my attitude or like behavior, I've taken close note of it and felt like this was something I wanted to bring to it because I know that life so well. And also just because I thought, yeah, an actor who has like lived through that kind of silliness like will bring something to it that someone who's just playing a polyamorous character won't be quite the same. This one always felt like I want to be front and center
Definitely. Is it hard to direct yourself?
in it. Directing myself is actually not too bad because I have an incredibly supportive team. Like our cinematographer Naisha Schreiner is just excellent at like helping frame up those shots, capturing great footage, and just always like helping me realize a vision. Like I'll be very vague and be like, I want it to look kind of like this and sort of like this. And she's like, oh, you mean a cowboy dolly? I'm like, great, that was it.
There you go.
And then Matt is an executive producer on the show and has directed a few episodes. And he also is always behind the camera. And since we have a shorthand as, romantic partners, he's great at just being like, well, other people might pussyfoot around it and be like, maybe if we try, he'd be like, that looked bad, do it again. Very awesome.
No bullshit from him.
No way. We save a lot of time that way. And I think other people sometimes like, ugh, he said that to him. I'm like, no, I needed to hear it. It's
You
fine.
need to hear it, yes. And Open to also includes some legendary drag race queens such as Laganja Estranja, Pandora Box, Manila Luzon. Why was it crucial to include drag artists, and what was it like working with them?
I think because drag queens have always been at the forefront of queer culture, and I very much wanted their influence felt in the show. I know I have felt inspired by them in my own queerness, and true form, they have made the show so much better and more fun. It just feels like the universe is more expansive. That like my boyfriend on the show, Cam, he has this side of himself where he's a budding drag queen and able to figure that out with a wonderful drag family. And I just feel very like championed and loved by these people in real life. Honestly, we've like gotten close, and I am very grateful that they see what we're trying to do and are supportive. And yeah, we just all have each other's backs, which is kind of always what I wanted when coming out, was to feel like I had like formed this happy queer family, and they're a large part of why I feel like I have that now.
That's awesome. Now, are all episodes of season one available to watch yet?
So the first 3 episodes are at the show's website right now, opentoitseries.com. The first 2 you can stream for free. The third costs $3.33. But a portion of the proceeds go to charity, the Trans Latina Coalition. And episode 4 will be online from April 10th to the end of the month because we're debuting episode 4 in Wicked Queer. So the plan is to release 4 through 9 before the end of the year, but the exact plan is a little indeterminate right now, just as we're having like distribution conversations. But I know we'll definitely have some film festival plays. And if you subscribe to the newsletter at opentoitseries.com, you will absolutely know the second thing.
Okay, perfect. Well, before getting involved with the entertainment industry, you managed an organic chemistry lab and planned to attend medical school. So what pushed you to make that switch?
Oof, boy. I often quote Sweet Home Alabama in this regard, which I'm gay, surprise. But where she's talking about the choice she's going to make, and she's like, I love New York, but this fits too. And that's how honestly medicine was for me. Like I could have been a very happy physician, but entertainment from a young age had a place in my heart. I was like writing stories in preschool, just regurgitating Disney at that point. But even still, I think the creative impulse was always within me. And the one thing I can say with certainty is like, if I'd become a physician, I always would have wondered what this life would have looked like for me. But living this life, uh, I don't feel bad that I never became a doctor. There are plenty of people that do that that are fantastic at it. One of our really good friends is a wonderful physician talking about like, tumors actually just being gas. And I'm like, great, I'm glad that's your area.
You can stay over there. That's your area. Yes.
Yep, that'll work.
Well, what inspires you to keep writing well thought out queer stories?
I just don't think there are enough queer stories. Like, honestly, one thing I say when talking about the show is how some of my influences that I adore just aren't around anymore. Like, I loved Bonding on Netflix and Special in the web series world. Hunting Season and The Outs really spoke to me. I loved Please Like Me. Work in Progress is hilarious. Like, there's just been, I mean, Pose, Schitt's Creek, you name it. Like, they're not everything's gonna be okay. It's all kind of gone at the moment, with the exception of a few like the L Word and Queer as Folk didn't even get too long on the air. So I just see how we're in a moment where, I don't think it's any coincidence that like drag queens are under attack, queer trans youth are under attack, and these shows don't have as much of a presence. To me, part of the reason why, and a lot of people would say why gay rights came as fast as they did, was because shows like Will and Grace, Modern Family, Golden Girls even like normalized queer people for the world. And I just think we need to keep being present, leading our own shows too. Some people say, well, oh, we have queer people as like supporting and leads on show. Isn't that enough? And I'm like, no, we can be centered in our own stories too. Like, just like how this is quite the grandiose comparison, but how Ruth Bader Ginsburg said there will be enough female Supreme Court justices on the court when there are 9. That's how I feel too. If every show on the air were queer, I'd be happy. So until then, let's just put more out there and show all the many, many different ways we can live, because goodness knows we've seen enough of straight people living, and we still should, but let's offer other viewpoints as well.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes. And you also have a feature drama called Second Generation that you're currently working on?
Yeah, so that right now I have a director attached and we're like in that fund financing phase. So
Um,
that's a movie that's very different from Open to It, but has some of the same objectives of just creating a more inclusive world. So it's about this Indian American family where they have a son who's this paragon, into Harvard early. He plays the sitar beautifully. The one thing they don't like is he's dating the, I'm here pitching it, that's fine. He's dating this girl next door who like they're not crazy about, but she's a lovely Indian girl. So like, okay, fine. But then one night, this happens before page 10, he accidentally falls from the roof while jumping over to her house and dies.
mhm.
And so the movie then cuts to 18 years later, where his geneticist parents now have a son who looks identical to the older brother, but could not be behaving more differently. He doesn't do well in school. He didn't get into Harvard. He's a great dancer, but there's one way in which he's exactly like the original, which is that he is attracted to the girl next door. Problem being that she's now 36 and he's
Oh,
18.
okay.
So it becomes this like it. Of course, it's steamy, so that in that way it's like open to it. But
Okay, gotcha.
um, more so than that, it's about parents' expectations for their children, especially as a child of immigrants. You have these expectations of honoring your culture, but also being an American with a different view of the world, and how you sort of reconcile that almost in a Finding Nemo way of like parents do need to like let their kids go in order to let them be themselves, and kids need to like decide for themselves how much of their parents' vision they want to service versus how much they want to live their own authentic lives.
Okay, awesome, fantastic. All right, Frank. Well, how can one stay up to date with you?
Sure. So if you'd like a good thirst trap, or just, a little update here and there and open to it, follow me on Instagram at frank.arthur.smith. It's the same on TikTok, but it's there's not that much there. But if motivated, I'll put out more. Um, but yes, definitely keep up with the show's website, opentoitseries.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. We update every month and just say what we've been up to, when to catch screenings, when new episodes are coming out. And the thumbnails can be shirtless men too. So,
It
you'll
doesn't.
find
Okay, then That's all we need, right?
Absolutely.
All right, then before we wrap up, are there any other upcoming projects or anything else you would like to mention or plug at this time?
What else is going on in my life? I'm like, is anything fully baked that I should be talking about? Oh, one thing I can say actually is my fiance and I met. So we directed and wrote the Christmas episode of Open to It together, which is episode 9.
Okay.
And I loved working with him and definitely want to work with him again. And he is a great writer in his own right. He has a pilot about the first interracial drag review to tour America in the 1950s called the Jewel Box Review. So
Nice.
definitely Janelle Monáe, if you're reading this, we want you to star. So please give us a call because it's a fantastic, uplifting piece, sort of in the vein of like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, that definitely, champions queer triumph and joy.
Okay. And I would love to interview Janelle Monáe as well. So if you're reading this, listening to this, yeah, hit us both up, okay?
Everyone wants a piece of you, Janelle Monáe, and I think you
We really
understand
do.
why.
We really do. All right, fantastic.